So let's move on to resume 4. Yes, you should be receiving now or soon feedback from me on resume 3, but hopefully you made all the content additions and corrections, and your content is pretty well taken care of now, and now you're working on CSS and fixing those problems. But even before you get those fixes back from me, or the suggestions and so on, you can still move on to resume 4. Before I go over all these instructions, let me show you what is the fundamental thing that's happening in resume 4, which is the idea of an external style sheet. Okay, and to do that, I'm going to go backwards to this file we were working with earlier, in when I showed you all the things I wanted you to do in CSS to your resume. It looked like this, remember? And I did margins and text and line height and so on and so forth, right? All this stuff. Good. Okay. Here's the issue. Imagine you've got not just a silly little 1, 2, or 3 page website. Imagine you have one that has dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages, right? When you want to decide because you're changing your branding or something, and you need to change all your fonts, you need to change it from one font to another, or maybe it's the color you've decided to change. If you had to go to every single one of those pages and go into the head and change the CSS, that would be just crazy, right? So instead, what we really do is we don't tend to put style in the head of the document. We tend to make an external style sheet, a single style sheet, or maybe a few style sheets that can control all the documents. And that way, all the style is kept in one place. So we're going to do that here. And I'm going to use this example here to do it too. So what if I took all this stuff from body right down through here, all this style that I built, okay, and I cut it out of there? It's gone, right? Are you sure it's gone? Well, let me show you. Save it. It's gone. Okay, good, it's gone. But what if instead I made a new file and I pasted this stuff in there? You can tell already there's an issue, right? It looks kind of bland, like where's the colors? And that is because I have to set a language, or if you're using brackets or some other program, you may have to save it with the proper extension, essentially so it knows it is CSS. I set the language to CSS, or perhaps I saved it as CSS in some other programs. And now I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save it with the name style.css. Just because it's simple and easy. So this is a CSS file. Okay, so did that do anything? No, it didn't, because that's great. It's a separate file, but it's not connected yet to my HTML document. This is how I make that connection. I actually have one of these right here. I'm just going to crib. I'm going to take it. This goes in the head, but not within a style section. In fact, you're going to do the same thing in your resume. You will actually get rid of the word style, right? And you will put in a link, which you'll read about in your textbook. There's a few ways to connect a style sheet to a document. I recommend the link method, which needs to have an rel style sheet and needs to have an href, which is the path to the style sheet. Now, you may actually end up putting your style sheet in a subfolder at some time. Of course, then you'll need a more extensive path. But right now, it's just the name of it. All right? And the name has to be right. It has to be .css. That all has to connect properly. Okay, good. And if I save this, and now I run it, all my styles are back again. But they're not in the document, remember? This stuff up here, ignore that. That's just all commented out. Instead, it's a script, essentially, a link that goes from the head of my document to the style sheet, which is a separate file. And do notice that there is absolutely no HTML in this file. If there is any, it'll screw it up. In other words, there's no little open-close style tags in this style. There's none anywhere now necessary, right? What's in a CSS file is just CSS. There's also not like any doc type or anything else. It's just CSS. Okay. Do notice now that we have it's CSS, we can have a CSS recognized as a language, and if there's a problem, you know, if we've forgotten something or misspelled something, it should give us some indicators and hints on that too. And also notice if we had like 100 websites, 100 HTML documents, each with that same link in the head area, we change the style in this one place and would affect all of them. Let's go back now to the exercise, which is here. All right. So here's what you're going to do. You'll make a project folder called something like resume 4, a root folder called something like resume 4. Oh, it shouldn't say the word root there. I'm sorry. It should just, the root folder should just be resume 4 and your name. I'll have to change that in the document I actually give to you. Not sure why it says that. It is a root folder. It doesn't have the word root in it. Just resume 4 and your name. And then go get your copy of resume 3, right? Go save a copy of that into that root folder. Yes, and I'll change that to be resume 4. Okay? And I think putting your name in these files is all fine, but frankly, I would be able to figure it out if your name wasn't there because it'll be your zip file that goes to me. And correct your stuff. So I will have sent you corrections and so on. You can make all those corrections now in the style area or make them later in the external style sheet. But whichever way, you'll do what I just did now. You cut all the style info out and paste it into a correctly formatted external style sheet, which just means it's something saved as a .css. In fact, I suggest you name it style and your name.css, and then link it as described in those pages, or like I just did, right? You'll create the style sheet in your code editor, in other words, Notepad++ or brackets or whatever, and set the language to CSS and or save it as CSS as I just did so it knows it's a CSS file. Create a link in the head as I just did. Remove the style commands that were embedded in the head area instead. Make sure there's no HTML in your CSS file. Run the page now and it should look just the same. In other words, the style works just the same whether it's in the head or whether it's an external document. There shouldn't be any changes in the style. If you screwed something up in the creation of the file and part of your CSS is not working, then you got to fix it in the new file. Don't go put some CSS in the document and some outside. It all needs to be in the external file. Good. So now a few more steps though. So you made an external style sheet, but I want you to do some more. I want you to go get your cover letter. Remember your cover letter? You had added CSS to the top of it, right? To make it look like that Bistro file or whatever, that Black Goose file. Go get that document, all right? I want you to go paste it into your root folder and rename it index.html. Also, I'm not sure if you remember, I hope you probably should have already made other corrections or additions to it. When you submitted that to me, did I tell you there's some things you needed to change? If you didn't change them, you need to change them now to make the content good in that letter. Okay? And then you're going to remove all the EM and strongs. Those EM and strongs you put in was just a practice thing. But frankly, you have to admit to yourself that you rarely actually use the EM and strongs in the places which really the semantic meaning really worked. You were just using them to use them. So why don't you get rid of them now? In fact, as your resume moves forward, you're going to have fewer inline elements, things that are EM and strong and B or so on. Make all corrections, additions, delete all the style code from the index.html, your former cover letter. So that CSS, get rid of it. Okay. Add including get rid of the style tags. And go get that same external style sheet link that you put in your resume 4 and go put it in the top of your index file, your former cover letter. You run that index and take a look at it, see how it looks. Now the style in your index should be exactly the style like the style in your cover letter. Sorry, in your resume. And maybe when you look at that, you say, maybe you want to make some tweaks, a little changes or something. Maybe you think things would look better if they all looked a certain way, a little different or something. So this would be a time when you could do it, but there'll be more of that in the future too. So when you've completed it, remember you should have 4 documents in your root folder, okay? And remember, it should be called resume 4 and your last name. It doesn't have to have the word root in it. So when you get it all right and everything's working, of course, you just zip it and put it up on the on Moodle. And there's a little note back down here, a continued warning, a reminder that you need to get some photos of yourself, probably an environmental portrait of you and like a headshot of you, we would call it, right? Not goofy Facebook photos, and photos of everything else that you've mentioned in your resume material. You're going to be breaking up this resume in the future into multiple pages. Each one's going to need at least an image. Maybe, and hopefully more than one image will actually get you extra credit. So go find some good images that make sense with your content. Okay. Please let me know if you have any questions or problems as you move into Resume 4. By the way, Resume 4 is due, you have through the weekend to do it. It's due on Monday of next week.